Greetings. I am Tracy D. Hall, President of Southwest Tennessee Community College. On behalf of the entire faculty and staff at Southwest, thank you to the Bellwether Awards Committee for this honor and the opportunity to shed light on our amazing Achieving the Dream journey. Being named a Bellwether Awards finalist is a wonderful affirmation of the efforts that have led to significant and meaningful transformation at Southwest. While our student success is our ultimate goal and reward, this opportunity is deeply satisfying as well. During this presentation, we will share with you our redesign, reinvent, and reset work and how we organize for large-scale systemic change. We will share tactics, outcomes, data, and most importantly, the lessons we learn in hopes that other community colleges facing similar challenges can glean replicable strategies that we hope will lead to similar or even greater results. Before we move on to the nuts and bolts of our Achieving the Dream work, please allow me to provide an overview of Southwest, who we serve, and the culture that frames our experience. Southwest Tennessee Community College is Memphis, Tennessee's only community college. We like to say we are the community's college. While we are proud of this distinction, we are acutely aware of the profound responsibility we have to the citizens of the Mid-South. Southwest is integral to the social and economic health and wealth of the Mid-South. We are a critical workforce engine and driver in Memphis and the region. Southwest is set in Memphis, our city on the mighty Mississippi River. Affectionately known as the Bluff City, Memphis is internationally renowned as the home of the blues, great barbecue, and world-famous Beale Street. Memphis also was the center of the civil rights movement with some of the most pivotal and tragic events of this critical time in American history, taking place just a few short minutes from one of our campuses. The sanitation strike and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. have made a profound impact on our city and culture. Although Memphis has emerged from this dark past and made profound progress over these past 50 years, more progress is needed for the 1 in 4 Memphis residents who live in poverty. The Memphis MSA is the poorest city with a population of 1 million or more in the state and region. We have come a long way, but have a long way to go, and Memphis cannot get there without Southwest. Let me share a little bit about Southwest. We have 7 locations serving Memphis and Shelby County. Southwest was born out of a merger of Shelby State Community College and State Technical Institute at Memphis in 2000. Our student body is predominantly Black, and we have the highest Pell eligible population in the state of Tennessee. Remember the merger? Well, one of the outcomes of that merger was a fractured culture that featured different processes for different campuses. This not only spawned silos, but also caused students to have a difficult time enrolling and graduating. Basically, it was hard to get in and hard to graduate from Southwest. And so in 2015, again, when I arrived, actually before I arrived, I received a Huron Consulting Group report. And in that report, it talked about how both internal and external stakeholders identified services to students as in vital need of improvement. And so this was from pre-admissions forward. Everything needed revamping. The admissions processes and customer service at the pre-enrollment stage were perceived to be hindering student access, success, and completion. So in effect, the college was putting up its own institutional barrier to student success. The college had also been experiencing a 7-year decline in enrollment and had the lowest graduation rates in the state. So there was an urgent call for immediate action. There was no time as a new president to come in and just spend a lot of time assessing the situation. I had to act quickly, immediately. And this was underscored by a meeting that I had with then Governor Bill Haslam to discuss the Drive to 55 initiative. So across the state, Drive to 55 was Tennessee's effort to get at least 55% of Tennesseans graduated with a post-secondary credential or degree. Also, we are an outcomes-based funding state. And so the 2 ways that we receive our revenue is through tuition and fees. Again, 7-year decline in enrollment is impacting that. And also through how we perform. our outcomes. We were struggling in that area as well. Again, lowest graduation rate in the state. So there was no time to wait to assess an issue because I already knew what the issues were with the Huron Consulting Report. Thank you. And now here's our Vice President for Student Affairs, Jacqueline Faulkner, who will provide details about our past organization structure and enrollment and how joining Achieving the Dream was a game changer for Southwest.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Faulkner, and I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs at Southwest Tennessee Community College. You previously heard from our President, Dr. Tracy D. Hall, as she briefly described the findings of the Huron Report, where our academic stakeholders, particularly our students, chronicle the difficulties that they encountered attempting to navigate the student experience as a first-time student all the way through successful completion. We borrowed this diagram from one of our partnering institutions of Achieving the Dream because we feel that it accurately reflected the experience that our students encountered upon Dr. Hall's arrival to Southwest Tennessee Community College. There were a number of twists and turns and broken processes that stood between a student starting and actually graduating from our institution. We keep this diagram before us as a constant reminder of how our own self inflicted policies, procedures, and processes can often impede student success and completion. This is the organizational chart that I encountered for the Division of Student Affairs upon my arrival in 2016. One of the very first things that I was charged with doing as the new vice president was reorganizing the Division of Student Affairs. You heard Dr. Hall previously talk about the merger between two historical organizations. Well, this organizational chart represents a lack of streamlining of any essential departments and services that previously existed at each of those standalone institutions. In essence, they had never created a one college model upon merger. Having 7 campus locations, our students would often encounter a different experience depending on the campus, which created confusion and inconsistency as they attempted to navigate the student experience. The organization was also very top heavy with administrative positions, oftentimes leaving our frontline roles who actually serve students directly lacking the critical capacity to meet student needs. This led to a plethora of student complaints and concerns about their ability to have access to timely information and the critical services to help them navigate. We reorganized the Division of Student Affairs, streamlining it to meet the essential needs of our students and supporting students throughout the entire life cycle from recruitment through graduation. It is now broken into two distinct areas, which represent what I call the historical mission of community college, which is access, and that's our enrollment services, but also the critical, urgent nature of community colleges, which is student success and retention. We ensure that students have the necessary wraparound support to help them overcome any barriers that they might encounter impeding their success to completion. We were also able to scale capacity in all of the student facing enrollment offices to improve our services, efficiencies, and responsiveness to students. It is important to note that this was all done through a flattening of management levels and reallocation of budget, and it represented absolutely no new funding. As we discuss our organizational transformation, we always use fall 2015 as our baseline data. That fall, we experienced a 12% decline in enrollment headcount from the previous fall, again represent our 7th consecutive year of enrollment decline. We also experienced a 3.4% decline in FTE. We had a 47% retention rate of full-time students and a 30% retention rate of part-time students. And our graduation rate at 3 years was a staggering 5%, the lowest in the state of Tennessee. And to no surprise, we were also experiencing annual declines in credential attainment, which was down by 16% from the previous year. I've noted in the previous slide that the overall institution's retention rate for full-time and part-time students was 47%. However, when you disaggregate that data, you see that even deeper achievement gaps existed among our Black students. We had a 42% retention rate for our Black full-time students in comparison to a 50% retention rate for our white students, representing an 8 percentage point difference. For our part-time students, that gap was even more pronounced with a full 13 percentage point difference between our white and Black students. One thing to note is that we serve a population of about 63 to 64% Black students, and we are designated as a predominantly Black institution. So when we fail to address the equity gaps that exist among our white and Black students, that means we're failing the vast majority of our student population. As you have heard, our startling student success metrics of declining enrollment, dwindling credentials, abysmal retention and graduation rates, coupled with the statewide attainment goal of Drive to 55 and being a part of a performance based funding state model, there is no question of the sense of urgency for Southwest to organize for systemic change. And the manner in which we chose to organize is by joining the Achieving the Dream Network in fall 2016. Achieving the Dream is a network of over 200 community colleges across the country focused on sustainable institutional transformation, but most important, creating successful outcomes for all students, essentially closing the achievement gaps. The transformational journey that we were embarking upon was so important to the entire state until our governor recorded a special message to the college community at our kickoff. In that message, he pledged his support for the needed change that Southwest was about to embark upon, and he stressed the importance of Southwest in meeting the state attainment goals. The college was then charged by our president to redesign the entire student experience by envisioning the critical components if we were building a brand new college, because essentially that's what we were doing. So we were given innovative freedom to create big, audacious goals. In higher education, we often hear of initiative fatigue because we tend to sometimes chase or follow the next big trend. This was not another committee. What we created in our transformational journey was the Southwest Way. And that Southwest Way has become the manner in which all institutional decisions are made because student success truly represents who we are as an institution. And now I'm going to kick it to Cindy Abity, who will talk to you more about how we organize for change through our Achieving the Dream journey.
I'm Cindy Abity, Program Director of Achieving the Dream at Southwest. I'm going to go through some approaches and tools that we had success with that you can adopt on your campus for your change efforts. As VP Faulkner explained, we joined Achieving the Dream in 2016. A core principle of Achieving the Dream is to use data to make informed decisions. Prior to us joining the network, most employees on campus had little to no access to data. It was not a part of our campus culture to discuss student success data. So we knew that this had to be a starting place for us. So we developed a data team. And we took a non-traditional approach. Instead of seeking out those who were well-versed in analyzing data, we looked for leaders from across the college, both formal and informal. We had a large group, around 25 or 30 people from every different department. And the idea was that if we could get these people involved and they could buy into it, that we would be able to bring more people along when we kicked off the work. Also, in the beginning, this data team acted as a sounding board for our core team. As senior leadership was working through ideas on how to launch this work on campus, the data team became an important part of that. And also just to create buzz. We had an idea that at our kickoff event that each of these data team leaders would host roundtable discussions and would take student success data and work with small groups to start analyzing and having conversations around that data. And then ultimately that each of the data team members would be put on one of the committees, which mean that each committee had one person who was well versed on how to get data, bring it back to the committee, and start conversations around that data. This is our organizational structure for our Achieving the Dream work. You know, typically when we see org structures, we think about permanent positions. And oftentimes we don't take that extra step to create an org chart for our campus initiatives or our change efforts. But this one was really important for us because it showed how everything was connected and also that the entire institution was involved in this work. So we see that it's led by the president. I manage the day-to-day operations as the program director. But then that next level, those two boxes to the left and right, really show that all parts of the college were invested in this work. We had marketing, communications, our data, institutional effectiveness, equity and compliance, all parts were dedicated to this work. Next, if you look at the bottom squares, each bullet point represents a different committee. We had committees ranging from the student experience all the way from recruiting to graduation. And what these committees were charged with was first examining data to identify any barriers that students were experiencing in that particular function or process. Next, the committees were asked to look at best practices from around the nation and to decide what we want to do at Southwest. And then creating a student-centered process map. And then finally, to create a report outlining recommendations that would be needed for the future of that particular function or process. One other important thing that I want to point out on this slide is if you look at who's leading these functional areas, we have a business services chair, that's a director, onboarding chair, that's a vice president. We have a dean and an associate vice president. And that's an important part of this. You know, senior leadership can't just say, we're going to change the institution and put that mandate out there. They have to have a seat at the table and be involved in the work on a day-to-day basis. Cross-functional teams. So following our campus-wide kickoff event where we had the opportunity to examine our student success data and talk about it, and our president stood up and gave this big audacious goal to redesign the institution. There were a lot of people. We had over 200 faculty, staff, administrators, students, and even community partners who wanted to be a part of this work. So we wanted to be very intentional on how we took those 200 and put them into those committees. So the chairs, the senior leadership chairs, and I probably spent a full day just analyzing those groups from a million different ways. First, we looked at cross-functional. We wanted to make sure that we had a mix in each one of student affairs, academic affairs, finance. We looked at diversity and race, diversity and sex, diversity at the tenure with the institution. We wanted to build very diverse cross-functional teams. Another part of that was we developed a review team. And a review team was important for us because when you're undertaking campus-wide change work, you don't want to turn anyone away. And oftentimes you'll have people who come late and want to be a part of it. So we didn't want to disrupt our committees that were already working. So the review team was a way to constantly bring people in throughout the year that the work was taking place. And their job came at the back end. Once those committees had developed the student-centered process maps and had written the recommendations, the review committee was an extra fresh set of eyes who examined that work and gave feedback. Next is breaking down silos is just hard work. It doesn't happen overnight, and it is a continuous exercise in engagement and transparency. The first tool that we use to break down silos, and I highly recommend it, is open forums. If you are trying to change culture at your institution, this is an easy way that you can implement. Senior administration puts themselves in a very vulnerable position to be on the stage where anyone can ask any question, but it moves your institution forward if you need transparency. This is something that our senior leaders did routinely during this time period, but also we've maintained it. Our president and senior leaders have forums with students each semester and also with employees. And actually this year we've done more than normal due to COVID, really just trying to give people information, ease fears, and just build in that transparency into our culture. Next, define everything. As beautiful as cross-functional teams can be and bringing that diversity of thought together, it's also you're bringing people together who have different language. Even though we all work for the same institution, different terms mean different things to all of us. So we found out pretty quickly that we needed to stop and from the very beginning define everything. Define the purpose of the meeting, define the purpose of the committee, define what the process means, and allow every single person in the room to explain what that process means from their point of view. Because one process looks very different from a faculty perspective than it does to the cashier's office or the registrar. And so by defining it from each position and then at the end coming back and saying, okay, how does this process support student success? It really made sure that everyone was on the same page and we were communicating from a common goal. Next, focus groups. You can do all of this work and investigate, but if you don't go to those that are impacted, you're missing an important part of it. So we would have focus groups with all different constituents groups. We would sometimes grab a pizza and walk around campus and just pull students into impromptu focus groups. Or our focus groups may be with frontline employees. We can create a process map and say that a function takes 48 hours, but if we don't ask the people who do that job and they tell us that no, that's not true, then you've done all of that hard work for nothing. So focus groups are very important, but also creating a continuous improvement loop. Each year, we have an annual review of processes, and we take that student experience from recruiting to graduation, we pull out those process maps, and we have a group of frontline workers, we just go through that process. If they're witnessing barriers that students are experiencing, we talk about those and then report those back up. I'm really interested to do the one that we have scheduled over the next month because it will be from the lens of how our processes have stood up through COVID, since we're working primarily in a virtual environment. So this is the process maps that were created at the end of year one of Achieving the Dream. This is a small fraction, this is not all. And then we had more process maps created in year two and since that time. But I really love this slide because as busy and colorful as it is, it really represents more than that. It represents the entire college community coming together to redesign the student experience. There was no one or two people who could create all of these processes. And if you look at them, you can see that each one of them has a different look, they're different colors, and that represents each of the different groups. So it's a really beautiful illustration of the entire college coming together to redesign. And so when you have something that beautiful, you have to celebrate it. And so we took these process maps and we blew them up into poster-size works of art. And we turned our library into an art gallery. And we had an appreciation luncheon for those 200 plus people who had been involved in the work. And then that afternoon, we invited in the community. We invited in the entire college community to view these process maps, to provide feedback. The committees who had worked on it were there. They could answer any questions people may had. It was just a really beautiful day. And then also the review committee that I mentioned earlier, they came and they started their work of reviewing the process maps. So we had done all of this amazing work. And how do you take that and you make sure that it's not just another initiative that we've done and we put on a shelf and put it away? We wanted to make these recommendations come to life. So we took the recommendations that came out of year 1 and 2 of Achieving the Dream, and they were put in as a tactical level into our Focus 2020 strategic plan. Because it was in the strategic plan, they were given budget consideration to ensure that they happened. At the same time, we created a Student Success Council. And the purpose of this was to make sure that all of those recommendations that came out of ATD and that we put in the strategic plan, that they worked, that we were monitoring them, and that we had a group that was looking at policies, procedures, and practices related to student success. And that's what this council does. It reviews policy changes related to academic and student affairs. So let me spend just one moment to talk a little bit more about our college's governance structure as a whole. Now, when this process first started, we only had the 4 organizations that you see on the right: the Student Government Association, Faculty Senate, the professional and staff organizations. And so essentially, even the governance structure operated in a silo. There was nowhere for them to report to or to report back to. So at the time that we created the Student Success Council, we also created the Institutional Affairs Council. And what the Institutional Affairs Council does is focus on campus climate and employee morale. And then we developed the President's Cabinet, which brings all of this together. The membership includes senior staff, the president, of course, and then the governance presidents from each of these areas. So they meet quarterly and they report back to what's happening in each of those constituent groups, and then allow that shared information to be disseminated across the college. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dean Jeremy Burnett so he can talk a little more in depth about the Student Success Council and how it works.
Thank you, Ms. Abity. And now I'm going to take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Burnett, and I serve as the Dean of Faculty Support here at Southwest. I'm also one of the co-chairs for the Student Success Council and the chair for the Teaching and Learning Subcouncil. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that we've done since joining Achieving the Dream to begin to move the needle on student success. So we knew that in order to move the needle on student success, that the Student Success Council, the Teaching and Learning Committee, and the Equity and Inclusion Committees, those governance committees within the Student Success Council, had to focus on three things. We needed to examine our data on student success gaps, to know where there were opportunities to improve performance for our students, to train and empower our faculty and staff so that they could focus on those gaps, to see where we could change things. And in particular, we wanted to focus on policy and examine our policies and consider our practices to see which practices need to be changed, which policies need to be changed or eliminated in order to provide better access to success for our students to support their success. We did that in primarily three areas. We looked at professional development and culturally responsive teaching. We also considered our Title III grant and the amount of resources, fiscal resources, that it was able to provide and leverage the work that we needed to do, in particular around our equity and inclusion practitioners. And we focused on the core of the curriculum, those courses that we have high enrollments in that really provided the ability for faculty fellows to focus on and move that needle. So in the Student Success Council, there was a specific structure. It has administrative oversight by both the Vice President for Academic Affairs and the Vice President for Student Affairs. There are three sub-councils within that structure: a Teaching and Learning Committee, an Equity and Inclusion Committee, and a Data Sub-Council. The Teaching and Learning Sub-Council actually has 9 faculty members, 10 staff that include faculty administrators such as chairs or deans, and has 2 students on it currently. The Equity and Inclusion Council has 5 faculty, 13 staff and faculty administrators, and 1 student. And our Data Sub-Council has 4 faculty and then 8 staff who also include faculty administrators. Those groups work together, so we all meet and collaborate to make sure that we're on the same page, focusing on similar items and informing each other of what each of the groups are doing, so that as we plan our work, that it's moving forward in a seamless manner. One of the areas that the Teaching and Learning Committee focused on was culturally responsive teaching. And in doing that over the past year, we planned for multiple avenues for multiple faculty engagements. We partnered with the Title III grant, the Strengthening Institutions grant called IDEAS, and the Teaching Academy, and we had significant participation by both faculty and staff. In particular, I wanted to draw your attention that within 12 months, we had nearly 1/3 of all full-time and part-time faculty engage in at least one training around culturally responsive teaching. And in a year, that's a significant amount of faculty engagement in that work. Add to it that the average faculty member attended 2, 3, 4, and 5, with the mode being 5 sessions that they participated in. That's just significant to have faculty to voluntarily participate in that much training on a particular topic, so that it wasn't just a one and done, that there was significant focus so that faculty could begin to consider their practices in the realm of teaching and learning, what they were doing in the classroom. We also, in collaboration and support for that work, the Division of Humanities, the dean there had a vision to create a gatekeeper faculty fellows program. We realized that our top 20 courses at the institution were gateway courses. Those courses, especially the top 12 that were in the Division of Humanities, had a failure rate of 38%. As an institution, what that meant, that we were really feeding into that myth, it's not such a myth for us, that you could look to your left and look to your right, and one of those 2 people were not going to be successful in this class. Their focus was to do multiple things, to redesign the co-requisite model. So in those math and English courses where reading and writing were the co-requisites, to focus on redesigning the co-requisite model. One faculty member that focused on data in that area said, is it possible for the co-requisite model to both work and not work at the institution? And that was just meaningful for that group to consider. Those faculty fellows also focused on speech, history, music, sociology. Again, those top 12 courses that were really the core of our curriculum that had significant numbers of enrollments. They've considered those courses in the redesign to make them student-centric with an equity-minded aspect and have seamless alignment amongst the courses. In the realm of making them student-centric and equity-minded, I want to give a case example where the music course, the Intro to Music, has looked and considered music in the context of Memphis. How can you have a conversation in a college course in Memphis about music and not talk about the history and impact of Memphis on music? How can you have a conversation and teach history in a college in Memphis and not talk about Memphis's impact on history and modern American history? So those are some of the items, the aspects that they've considered to provide place to get students involved and see the realities of the impact of where they live on our culture and society at large. We also leveraged and received a Title III Strengthening Institutions grant labeled Ideas. That's a $2.1 million award over a 3-year period. We just finished up our first year of that program. And what they've done is been able to focus on scaling up for professional academic advising. In year 1 of our ATD work, and as our president, Dr. Hall, also guided us to do, those groups focused and planned to move academic advising at the institution from being a shared vision between academic advisors, professional advisors, and faculty advisors to being wholly in the hands of the professional academic advisors. The Strengthening Institutions Grant has provided the seed money to start scaling up staffing in that realm as we wait for funding from an institutional perspective to become available based on increasing enrollments, based on increasing availability of state monies and state appropriations to fund that post-grant. It's also provided seed money for supplemental instruction to have individuals who are embedded in the courses to assist students outside of the class period time, but still being embedded within the class with that faculty member to be on the same page with the faculty member to provide supplemental instruction support as a wraparound service to increase student success in those courses. We've had a long history of a very successful peer mentoring program at the institution, but it was very small in terms of the number of students it reached compared to our entire student body. The Title III grant has allowed for that to significantly scale peer mentoring as an institution and provide the resources in order to do that. And also the Title III grant has increased our ability to increase our data capacity and build structures in place that will be in place after the grant is gone so that we have those structures and data pieces in place. In particular, also the Strengthening Institutions Grant has created this thing called Equity and Inclusion Practitioners. What that is individuals from around the institution who have delved into the data, delved into the work in their particular areas to consider what their practices, what the data says about their particular units. I have at the bottom of the slide 6 equity and inclusion practitioner reports from one particular area of the institution, the Office of High Impact Practices and Innovation. And what they did is they looked at do high impact practices at Southwest make a difference for student success? Are students, based on our makeup as an institution, from Pell eligible students, from students of color, from Black students, do they participate in high impact practices at the same rates that they exist at the institution? Or are we only serving particular student bodies? And so that's really opened their eyes to consider that work. The end result is that it's shown that while students do participate in equitable amounts at the institution, there are some areas for improvement where our high impact practices can help strengthen student success. So the result of all of that work, all of that collaboration, all of that planning to do the work, what has that done? It's created some documented outcomes of improvement for us as an institution. First, I want to focus on creating some equity and success. How have we moved that needle? What you see here on this chart is from 2015 to 2018. We tracked the number of credit hours that students attempted versus the actual credit hours they earned at the end of the semester. In 2015, that number was 72%. So students only earned 72% of all of the hours that they attempted at the end of the semester. 2016, we increased that number slightly to 73%. However, in 2018, we started to see significant improvements of the work that we've done to really move that needle. What we did was move that needle in first-generation students, in Pell-eligible students, and in Black students. That is our student population. By focusing on creating equity for those students, we move the needle as an institution overall to just shy of 80%. Now students in 2018 completed 77% of all credit hours attempted. Another area in which we're able to celebrate success is in our graduation rates. In 2011, our entering freshman class only graduated within 3 years at a rate of 7.3%. That means that in 2014, our entering freshman class of 2011, only 7.3 out of 100 students had actually graduated. We've moved that needle every year upwards so that in 2016, we had nearly doubled that rate. So the entering freshman class of 2016, 13.5% of those had graduated by 2019. That's a significant increase. We've almost doubled that number in that 5-year period. That is unheard of to make such significant increases in higher education. However, that does still mean that 86 out of 100 entering freshmen did not graduate within 3 years. So while we have doubled that number, there's still a lot of work for us to do yet. Ms. Faulkner showed you earlier our fall 15 numbers and what they look like. Decreasing enrollment rates. Less than half of our full-time students returning one fall to the next. Only 3 out of 10 part-time students returning one fall to the next. And a 5% graduation rates, and our actual numbers of graduates going downward. What we saw by fall 2017 was a reversal of that trend. Enrollments were up by 8%. Our FTE, full-time equivalent enrollment, was up by 10%. We had increased our retention to less than 50% to 53%. 5.3 out of 10 students returned one fall over the next. 3.4 out of 10, 34% of our part-time students returned one fall to the next. Our graduation rate by 17, as indicated in the previous slides, had doubled to 10%. And the sheer numbers of students who earned a degree or some credential had increased by 26% year over year. Again, how did we do that? We focused on creating equity and success. In fall 15, again, you saw those numbers previously here from Ms. Faulkner. Those numbers had grown significantly. So again, 5.3, 53% of our students returned fall to fall. We made that happen by having a 10 percentage point increase of our Black students returning one fall over the next. At the same time, we increased that retention rate of white students by 6 percentage points. We increased retention for everyone, but we closed the gap by 4 percentage points of Black students compared to white students. Significant gains to start to create equity for our students. Similar story as you see in the bottom portion of the slide for our part-time students. We increased Black students return fall over fall by 6 percentage points, while increasing white students return fall over fall by 2 percentage points, significantly closing those gaps in success for our students. In the end, what did all of that work, all this planning, all this collaboration amongst these governors and councils, and the work of the boots on the ground by every faculty member, every employee at the institution, the heavy lift of the big audacious goal that Dr. Hall had given us earlier on results in increasing the financial stability of the institution to make changes. In particular, from the 18-19 fiscal year to the 19-20 fiscal year, we had a $1.6 million increase in state appropriations. That's $1.6 million year over year increase. That meant that our 19-20 state appropriation was the highest it had been since the fiscal year 12-13. Our growth rate year over year, starting in 16-17 and beyond, increased at an increasing rate. So we were getting more money at a higher rate year over year from our state appropriations. Our 19-20 state appropriations in particular, we were able to identify that they were improved by the outcomes, being an outcome-driven state for appropriations. What we saw were dual enrollment increases, as well as associate degree attainment, both in numbers of associate degrees earned and the number of associate degrees earned per 100 student equivalents increased. That led to those significant gains as a result of planning, collaboration amongst those governing councils, and then resulting in increased finances for the institution to even do more work in this realm. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Vice President Jacqueline Faulkner, who will talk to you some about the lessons that we've learned.
Thank you, Jeremy. Now that you've heard the clear clarion call that was before Southwest, you've learned the challenges that we had to overcome as a college. You've also learned the tools that we leveraged to organize for change. And lastly, you've just heard that we have started to move the needle on our success metric, and most importantly, started to close achievement gaps. Now I will share with you some lessons that we learned along the way that we believe are pivotal for any organization considering replicating our model. First of all, it's important to create a centralized location for information and data for all who are interested in to have access to. Transparency is key. And so, as individuals might be apprehensive about the work, the more you can share information and create means of getting information to the college community, the more you can bring individuals into your movement. And likewise, it's important to celebrate successes along the way. Everyone wants to be a part of a winning team. So at every juncture that we experience enrollment growth, growth in our retention rates or our graduation rates, we celebrated that. We shouted it from the rooftops because we wanted to bring others into the journey that we were on. And it actually worked. During year two, we had other individuals who had previously not been involved who pledged their support and wanted to be involved in this work. Next, you need to create accountability for all who are involved. We were accountable to the president, who then made herself accountable to the community, media, and even the governor. And what is very transparent about our current state, what we needed to get there, and how we plan to do it. And so, as she made herself vulnerable to the community and to our other stakeholders, as a college, we were accountable to her to ensure that we were carrying out that vision of transforming our organization. Next, create big, audacious goals. If you've worked in higher education anytime, you've seen a number of pilot projects or small initiatives that move the needle with that very small population of students that they're seeking to change. So they're working with 50 students, and yes, you accomplish great retention goals, great graduation rates of those 50 students. But it's very hard to then take that model to scale. We found it important to create big, audacious goals where we were attempting to impact change and permeate it throughout the organization instead of doing boutique or pilot projects. Next, top administrators must be heavily involved in this work to lead the change. It's important that while you are planning for systemic change and long-term change, that you are addressing the immediate concerns as they arise. And having top administrators involved allows you to address all of the immediate needs while you're continuing to progress toward long-term systemic change. Communication should be frequent and transparent. We utilize, as you've heard, town hall meetings, newsletters, a number of forums to ensure that we kept communication flowing from the top down and from the bottom up of our organization. It's important as you are creating long-term systemic change that, again, you are transparent with your entire college community. And frontline staff and faculty must be involved and brought into the work. The work cannot happen to them. It must happen with and through them. So as you are creating plans, ensure that those individuals who are charged with initiating and implementing those plans are involved in the work, because it's very easy to sit in a meeting or a committee and develop long range plans, but you're not the actual person who works with the students on the day to day. You don't have the keen understanding of student needs, student concerns, or barriers. So it's very important that you get those individuals in on the front line who hear from students every day, who work with students for the vast majority of their time during the day, into the work so that you have the voice throughout the organization involved in whatever change is moving forth. Now I will kick it to Dr. Hall, who will close us up and open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Jackie, Cindy, and Jeremy, for your outstanding presentations. Before I open the floor for questions, I want to provide a quick overview of how we moved from what to why and now have our sights on what's next. Here's a graphic that we think beautifully illustrates our journey. When we began, there was no Southwest Way. Here you see the Huron report in 2015. This report kick-started our redesign, reinvent, and reset journey and laid the foundation for our efforts. It was a critical guide telling us where we needed to improve. It was our roadmap that framed our work after we joined Achieving the Dream in 2016. From there, we took off. We adopted our Focus 2020 strategic plan in 2018. We also established our Student Success Council that year to ensure the strategic plan aligns with student success. Then in 2019, we received a highly competitive Title III grant to help strengthen the work that we were already doing through our student success work. Moving the needle in equity and achievement was a feather in our cap and one of the major reasons we achieved ATD Leader College status. This is a prestigious designation that is not easily attained, and we are truly proud of this achievement. Now we have our sights on what's next, and that is our new strategic plan that we will adopt in 2021. As you can see, every tactic, every strategy, and every achievement has been interrelated. And now we have a Southwest way, and our journey continues. On behalf of Jackie, Cindy, and Jeremy, and all of Southwest, thank you for your time and kind attention. And again, thank you to the committee for this auspicious opportunity. We're happy to now answer any questions you may have.